the Sutton and Finance Warrant Committee meeting. Today is the 25th of February, so we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we'll start by welcoming George Watson, right? George Watson?
Yes.
Right, who's a new member, so welcome, and glad to have you here. And Tony, who we said hi to you once before, but you were unable to be here, so welcome again. So we'll turn it over to you, Jim. Give us a update as to what we can expect.
All right, everybody, if you haven't gotten one already, here's the list of budget hearings for the FinCom right here, so you can grab that.
There's no change in what we had from before, correct?
So this is what was sent out. We're still working on the sewer project, so that might be on April 1st when we have special articles for the warrant versus with the sewer department on the 25th. So we're still waiting to see on that, but so this is probably old news for most of you. What I like to do is go through the budget presentation that I presented to the Board of Selectmen. I do this every year. I typically present to the Select Board now, and hopefully at May town meeting agrees to a charter change, and it permanently becomes a Select Board, if that's what the town wishes. I typically present to them at the second meeting in February, and the following week I present to the Finance Committee. I've been doing that for the last 10 plus years. So for some of you this is old hat, but for many of the rest of you, it's new. So, can you get the light?
Sure. Scoot over here with you.
Angela, a second, get this up on the screen. See if I turn this on, that helps.
Yeah.
Because then you can kind of see it. Still trying to
I
figure this
refuse to
out.
say a word.
It's on, yeah,
Yeah.
it's on.
It's on now, Jim.
And let's let the board see it as well.
You see okay?
Yeah. All right, that's clear enough, and the public can see it as well. This is the preliminary budget. As I mentioned earlier, I present the preliminary budget at some point in February. The final budget is done as soon as I have the final numbers. We are still awaiting healthcare. We're still awaiting EVT's final budget. School committee approves that at some point at the beginning of March. Still awaiting property casualty insurance and a few smaller items, but those are the big items that we're still awaiting on. So right now we've got a budget, and we'll have a budget of $34,263,941. $1,037,950 over last year's final budget, or 3.1% increase. We have a deficit of $95,000, and if it was just that, we would be able to handle that with some potential cuts that we have in mind. The problem is healthcare. Right now, healthcare is a big unknown. We have met with our advisors, and they have said that expect a mid-teens increase. If we get a mid-teens increase, then that number will jump to probably $400,000 deficit. We are meeting with the Insurance Advisory Committee tomorrow, all the unions from across the town, to talk to them about plan design changes. Last year was the first year in a long time that we had no plan design changes. Last year, we had a 7% increase for the employees and the town. This year, our experience, our losses are significant. As I probably mentioned at an earlier meeting, we've had 1 month of over 400%. And a lot of it's based upon the number, let's say 90. Anything below 90 in experience, that's good for the town and good for the insurance company. Anything over 90 is bad for the town and bad for the insurance company. The insurance company's losing money with that. So that's 90. You know, you get 400, you get 175. Those are big numbers that are really hurting the insurance company. They're losing a ton of money, and we pay for it in our renewal. Yeah.
Jim, are the possible design changes, are they contractual? Do they have to be bargained?
Not with the IAC. That, you know, the trick is that that's all the unions in town, and we meet with them. The one thing, the teachers' union does discuss it, and they do put it into their contract. I've never had an issue with dealing with the IAC, and part of that's because of the Healthcare Reform Act of 2012, where it gave the towns unilateral authority to change healthcare. So I've got that hanging over everybody's head,
Okay.
including my own. I have the ability to go to the Board of Selectmen by a majority vote, get the power to make unilateral changes, and share whatever we get in the first year, 25% to the unions. They're not interested in doing that. They don't want to do that. We have a very good relationship with each other. We discuss, we negotiate back and forth. We've got a good relationship. So if it gets to that point, at some point down the road, we'll discuss it at that time.
I was
But,
just wondering how likely it would be to be successful, and it sounds like it is.
you know, you never know going in. I don't assume anything. The one thing I have done, though, to be honest, is fund the healthcare increase this year at 8%.
Yes.
Versus mid-teens. So in that way, I guess I'm assuming that I will get some support with this.
Right.
So it's in at 8% currently?
It is currently, yes. And that's why the deficit is what it is. If it was mid-teens, that would be up around $400,000, a $300,000 increase.
When we saw you about a month ago, it was trending much lower. Have you gotten any more recent numbers? Are we still
Yep.
trending?
We got one additional month's experience, and the trend had been in the low 80s, high 70s, low 80s. The latest month is 106. So it took a tick up. Still reasonable. It's not 170 or 400, so it's reasonable. So our average is probably more like 85 over the last 6 months now. A decent position. If the hundreds, 110, continue, then it's not looking as good for us for future renewals. We have begun a discussion with Maya, where we used to have our health insurance through them, Blue Cross Blue Shield, essentially. A few years ago, the IAC in the town agreed to switch from Maya to Fallon. And we've had a decent relationship with Fallon. Somebody from Maya gave me a call out of the blue and asked if they could submit a quote for our business, and I said, sure, go ahead and submit that to us, and I'm still awaiting on that. It's been a couple weeks, so I don't know if they've looked at the census data and the information, the healthcare information, and they, yeah, we'll get that to you, at May, June kind of time frame. So I'm not overly optimistic at that, but.
What are the contracted rate increases?
Well, what are the contracted rate increases?
The union raises, what?
They generally range from 2 to 2.5%. The teachers are a little different because they got steps and lanes, and if you get a step increase on an annual basis, which I think is 2%, but a lane change is when you get additional education.
Right.
So you could get a 4 to 6% increase. So it's difficult to say.
Is it possible that some of the low-paid people in the union, their raise may not cover the increase in their health
Yeah,
insurance.
yeah, no, that's an issue that we deal with every year. The fact is, our cost of living adjustments, the unions, town unions got a 2.5% increase. But they got a 7% increase on healthcare last year and 8% this year. That's 15% that, the raises don't keep up with healthcare. And I think that's beyond just town hall. It's almost universal that this is going on. So it is an issue. We are, and that's the importance of, this IAC group. It's a trusted group, we have a good relationship, and we try to work with them rather than dictating what healthcare will be for the year. But we can talk more about that. There's a lengthy discussion with healthcare. We've increased the school appropriation by $400,000. The governor's budget is proposing an additional $39,000 and change, which is $30 per student in the town of Sutton. Special education costs continue to be an issue with the town. We are working with the superintendent and the business manager to figure out a solution to that, and you'll probably see something shortly. We're going to present a concept to the Board of Selectmen at a future meeting, and then I'll follow up with you folks. We are significantly over net school spending required. BVT had one fewer student attending. The rate is going up over $90,000, and a large part of that is just the wealth of this district. We are the wealthiest town in the 13-town BVT district. It is what it is, and we just work with that. Norfolk Aggie, right now there are no students that have applied, but it doesn't mean there won't be. Last year we had somebody notified us in late summer, early fall that somebody that was homeschooled went to Norfolk Aggie, and it was kind of flying under the radar. And then we had to do a change, reserve fund transfer of $12,000–13,000. Healthcare costs are preliminary increasing 15%, but we've only increased it by 8%. We will look at the IAC to get those changes. HR payroll, Erin Chinapi currently serves in that role. We made that change this year. She's doing it already for the town. Payroll, HR is a little bit more than she's doing right now. She's doing payroll for the town, payroll for the school department. And she's also in some way doing HR for the town and the school. So it sort of simplifies this. We put an office up here on the 3rd floor, town hall, former storage area, and now she's able to focus just on doing the HR function of her job. Provide some privacy. In the past, we kind of shared it between a number of different department heads, the treasurer, in that big office downstairs. It wasn't all that confidential. If you wanted to discuss, something personal that was going on in your life, you needed to change something. It just wasn't the best situation. So, finance director / accountant.
Is this a new position?
It is. It's a person that got a bump in pay for the additional work that she's taking on as the HR.
So the $51,000 is not new, it's the increase that's new?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by taking over payroll from the school, did that eliminate something at the school?
It did. It allowed them to consolidate positions, and I think they were able to eliminate a what was Gail Woodland's position?
She was payroll clerk.
Payroll
yes.
clerk. So they were able to eliminate a payroll clerk over at the school department, saving $40,000+. So there was a bit of savings over there. Finance director / accountant, I'm recommending that I'll reappoint Tim this spring to the accountant's position, and I'm asking the board, and they've agreed to classify him as the finance director. He's sort of filling that role in some ways currently. He works closely with the treasurer's office, the collector's office. We've got a new treasurer, a new assistant accountant, and there's a lot of training that goes on. and Tim kind of runs the finances for the town, even though there are other departments under his control, under his watch. So we just formally make that official. It's a $5,000 increase from the town, and $5,000 will come from the Manchog Water District. He's currently doing the books for the Manchog Water District. It's been a bit of an issue recently. I think it was a great financial deal on Manchog Water's part, getting Tim to organize their finances for them. And part of the reason that's so important to the town is we can't submit our recap and get our tax rate set until we get our water districts submitting their recap as well. So Tim was very involved this last fall working with Manchog Water because their books needed some work. So that's a good situation anyway. Police Lieutenant Dave Perry will be retiring this summer. He will be missed. He's been around forever, it feels like, but he's been lieutenant for probably, well, at least 13 years, 14 years. He and Dennis Toll are partners, and he will be missed, but we will be in the process of hiring a new lieutenant from a group of 4 sergeants that we have. We like to do it internally. We prefer not to go out to an outsider. If the situation presents itself. If there are no sergeants that are able to do the job, then we will go outside, but hopefully we find somebody internally. We're planning on...
If we move a sergeant up, then we're gonna hire another sergeant?
Well, I don't know, it goes back a few years, but you might recall that we created a 4th sergeant's position. And part of that thinking was that we have a greater pool to select the next lieutenant from. We weren't sure when Dave Perry was going to retire. We knew it was some point in the near future. So having that 4th sergeant just increases the selection pool. Once we select a lieutenant, then we may go back to 3 sergeants. That final decision hasn't been made yet, but we are talking about that. That was the plan.
Is Dave one of those that's grandfathered that we have to buy out his vacation?
We have to buy out his sick leave.
We've already funded for that though, right?
We've created the compensated absences fund.
Right.
I believe that was last town meeting, and funded it with $200,000 in free cash. So that fund is available. We're creating another financial resource funding structure to pay that. So, that's one of the positions, because he had so much sick leave buyback, roughly $45,000, that we couldn't fund it out of the operating budget. Typically, we're able to fund it, sick leave buyback, out of the operating budget, but some of the large sick leave buybacks that are still on the books as liabilities to the town, we need that funding source to deal with that. And there are a handful of others in that situation as well.
Do we accrue for that? Accrue?
Do you what?
Do you accrue on the financials for sick leave?
They're in the audited financial statement, yes.
Yeah.
But, we've eliminated sick leave buyback from all our contracts as of 2008. So it's no longer an issue for us. What we do have legacy costs of some individuals that are still eligible for sick leave buyback that have been with us for prior to 2008.
So you track that, and is that what's in the accrual?
Yes.
The sewer project, we are looking to do a sewer project from the villas to the school campus, a straight run down Boston Road, and it will tie into Town Hall as well, a little bit on Uxbridge Road just to tie into Town Hall. So right now we're looking to get this done. We're meeting with the designers this week. We are planning on doing a test well for the gray water system. All this stuff is still in action, but this will allow us to avoid the $1 million replacement of the school's treatment plant. Right now, there's $130,000 that the school department pays for operation and maintenance of that facility. So that's over 20 years, 2.6 million. That assumes it's not going up in cost, which never happens. There's always an inflation increase. The town hall septic system has failed. Paving Boston Road, there's a number of benefits to this project. But there are also some issues that people have, and we'll have to discuss that in depth. We have a purchase and sale agreement on 6 acres.
Can I, not to be answered tonight, but
Yep.
Susan, and I pass those along to you, if you would be kind enough to, either for yourself or to pass those on to someone else. Sue, who's on the board here, or on the committee, was unable to be here tonight, and she has some questions specific to the sewer that she wanted passed along. I gave them to Jim earlier, so if you could pass
Sure.
those on to whomever.
Yeah, we'll get
and when
those.
they come in, they could be answered. I appreciate it. Thank
One of the questions was, wondering why the sewer department can't take over operation and maintenance of the treatment plant, which would save the cost to the school department without installing sewer down there. The reality is the sewer department is an enterprise fund, and the sewer users pay for sewer through the user fees in the sewer department. So running the school department wastewater treatment plant doesn't really fit in with the enterprise fund. And in addition, Don would need to hire 2 additional staff members. We did look at that in the past. At all grade 4 certified treatment operators. The current sewer plant down in Manchog, there's 1 operator. Don's listed on the license, and there can't be 2 operators down there.
I just wanted to go on record that she'd passed the questions,
Yeah.
because she's not here.
But just one question, in the notes, there was residents along the road can also connect to the sewer line.
Yes.
Will there be assessments associated with each connection to offset the cost?
There will be a connection fee. Every individual that decides to tie into that line will be charged normally $5,000 for a connection fee. The sewer,
Plus, the resident has to pay the cost to run it from their house to the street.
Right.
So
right.
it doesn't cost the town anything.
But the sewer department is considering potentially waiving tie-in fees for a period of time for the first 2 years to encourage individuals to tie in to the sewer line. So that's still a work in progress, but that is a potential. You also have the issue of some people, depending upon where they're located along the line, might need a grinder pump to pump the sewer to the gravity to bring it down to Blackstone Street pump station. So, that's an additional cost as well. Okay, purchase and sale on 6 acres of across the street from Waters Farm. The Conservation Commission just met and approved the $80,000 transfer from the Conservation Land Acquisition Fund and $145,000 from free cash. That totals $225,000, and this will permanently protect that land. It will, in the end, be under the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission, which is the case with the rest of Waters Farm. But it will permanently protect it as open space and used for the town for parking, for Waters Farm Days, et cetera. So I think it's a great vote, and I'm thankful for the Conservation Commission. Departmental changes, that number will go down a little bit. These are overall budget changes with the cuts that we're planning on making. Employee benefits increase, that's essentially the same. If we don't get the plan design changes, we'll have to think of another avenue to do that, but that number could jump if we agree on the mid-teens increase, which I don't see happening. Debt service decrease, this is debt exclusion debt, and it's rolling off from various projects that we borrowed for under debt exclusion. Educational increases, Sutton High Schools, that should be 430, that's last year's number, 439,630 is the number that's going this year, and then BVT and Norfolk Aggie. Norfolk Aggie is no increase, because we don't have an increase there. We're expecting no additional students that are gonna attend Norfolk Aggie.
So Jim, when you, for the math for BVT, is it because they're gonna ask for a 4-point-something increase, so you take the total, even though we have one less student, when we take our proportional part of that, because of you know, the wealth of the town, so
Right.
whatever our percentage is, when you calculate all that, so even though I have one less student, our cost goes up 90,000. Am
Yes.
I basically right, Tim?
Well, part of it is the budget increase that BVT is talking about enacting. You know, in the forecast, the 5-year forecast that I'll talk about in a second, I think I presented that to this committee at earlier time. But we anticipate a 3% increase in the operation of BVT. We maybe need to adjust that, because I don't know when the last time we got a 3%. He's
Wishful
talking
thinking.
more like a 4%. So I don't know what the final budget will look like, but a 4% increase is probably more like 60,000-70,000. And then, you know, then we calculate the extra amount that the Chapter 71 formula requires us to pay. You know, and Dr. Fitzpatrick rightfully says that I have nothing to do with it. It's the state, it's the formula, it's the way it's done. It's calculated for him. You know, the fact is, we're paying, you know, Uxbridge has 30 more students than the town of Sutton, yet we're paying pretty much the same amount to send our students to BVT as Uxbridge is, with an additional 30 students going. So it's a challenge for us. You know, this is how we generate our budget. These are the revenues that support our budget. There are 3 primary revenues that support our budget. It's the local property tax, state aid, and local receipts. Those are the 3 major funding sources for this budget, and always have been. Property tax, it's interesting, a larger and larger burden to fund this budget is falling on the taxpayers in Sutton. Back 10, 11 years ago, property taxes accounted for 59% of the budget. State aid was 26% of the budget. This year, local property taxes are accounting for 73% of the budget, and state aid is coming up with 18% of the budget. So dramatic shift of resources, and a lot of it is, if you look just at the school department, you know, last 3 years, we've given the school department $400,000 a year, so that's $1.2 million. State aid is $40,000 a year, so for $120,000. So that's a tenfold difference, 1.2 versus 120. And that, we will continue to have that separation. So a greater and greater burden or amount of this budget will be funded by local property taxpayers. I don't see that changing, because it's been a constant increase. This is kind of confusing. That's the numbers behind this chart. And this chart essentially says that what I just explained, state aid in 2009, we peaked. 13 fiscal years later, we're still not at the level we were in 2009. And this is not adjusted for inflation. These are real dollars. So, you know, they peaked and then they cut precipitously. And then they've slowly grown back to where they are today. We've just exceeded the Chapter 70 amount that was allocated by the state in 2009 and 2021. The governor's budget exceeded it by, you know, $13,000. State aid, local aid, UGA, unrestricted general government aid, is still $115,000 less than it was in 2009.
Was that 2009 spike related to the recession, or was there any kind of activity that caused that?
That was the peak, and then I don't even know that they did something with federal aid as well, but you know, you can see it was quickly cut off. And I think there was some 9C cuts as well, maybe in 2009, 2010. It's difficult for me to recall that, but do you recall we had 9C cuts? And I think it was 2009. So I don't know what actually happened if we got the state aid, but then mid-year, I think Deval Patrick was the governor, cut that state aid, or just said, you're gonna have to deal with these cuts, because the economy was just out of control. New growth, we budget $150,000. We generally exceed that, as we have back in these years. Even during the heart of the recession, this was the lowest year, and that was probably 182. But, you know, new growth is susceptible to a slowdown, a recession. You know, if the economy hits the skids, then people aren't building developments, and new growth, there is no new growth, and then you worry about it. I'm a little concerned about a recession on the horizon. I don't know whether it's coming this year or next year or in the near future, but you know, we've had really unlimited growth in the market and the stock market, so. We budget conservatively on this number, and no excuses for that. We just do that.
Yeah, I mean, on the right side of that schedule, of that graph, a couple good years of commercial growth. That's Market 32 and that whole plaza. We've had some commercial growth. The big spike was personal property taxes when the utilities did putting all the new poles in and everything. That was huge. That was like $600,000-700,000 just from that alone. That was a one-time nice boost for the town. Depending on what the economy does, you know, we have, you know, commercial growth is limited to water. Residential growth is limited to land. You know, I don't think there are any big residential projects in the wings.
Well, we do have the over 55 on Ormsby Road, the Wedgwood development, which, you know, is one, but the land just isn't available for others.
Right.
So, you know, that is making progress. Will look for a builder. Randy Waterman is the developer. He's right now looking for a builder to construct, I think, 86 or 92 over 55 units. Hopefully some affordable,
Gilmore projects, are they reflected yet?
you know, those were both TIFs. Tax increment financing. So we gave them a significant tax break. They're both 15-year deals, IBA and prime metals. And the first couple years, there were no taxes collected. The one thing with IBA is we're getting $50,000 in excise tax, motor vehicle excise tax, because they have big trucks that they store at their site. So we're not losing a whole lot by IBA. Prime Metals is a major manufacturer, 300 jobs, and that kind of puts us on the map as far as you know, manufacturing here in the town. But we will get that money over time, just not right now. There is a benefit.
Right. We're going to the same place.
All right, so you want to do it or you want me to?
No, you do it.
So there is a benefit for IBA and Prime Metals, and that is that those 300 to 400 employees of those companies create secondary, tertiary benefits to the town through buying food at Market 32, eating at restaurants, going out to eat. One of this is local receipts, and this is also susceptible to the economy because the largest local receipt we have is motor vehicle excise tax. We generally create like 1.5, 1.6 million in motor vehicle excise tax. During a recession, people are not buying new cars. They hang on to the cars for a long period of time, and that number dips significantly. You saw that in the heart of the recession, over a 2-year period of time, in 8 to 11. It went from 2.1 to less than 1.8, 1.7, and and a lot of that, I would assume, not looking at the numbers, are motor vehicle excise tax dropping off. So the point of, there's an additional slide that I thought was following that other slide, is that those 300, 400 employees need a place to eat. And meals tax is one of our local receipts that we generate. In 2015-16, we had about $80,000 in meals and hotel tax. That number in 2019 grew to $160,000, so doubled essentially over a 3-year period of time. Now, within that 3-year period of time, we had Starbucks up and running, we had Five Guys, we had Market 32 selling food, we had Brickstones that opened during that time frame. All of that created additional meals tax that helps our local receipts. So the more employees we have, the more places they need to go out to eat. Hopefully the more restaurants will be developed here in town, and that would benefit us through those means.
So those two spikes you see at the end, majority of that is permits, inspections. So your building inspection fees, wire inspection, plumbing inspection, that's the commercial growth. So we get a bunch of fees. So Prime Meadow, even though in IBA, even though we're not getting real estate taxes, we did get fees, big fees. And that's reflected in those spikes.
You know, I think the building building application was roughly $180,000 for Prime Metals. So that's a big chunk. Problem is it's one-time revenue,
Right.
when we can't count on that. But it is definitely helpful. You know, last year at this time, I presented the 5-year forecast. Now, this is just a snapshot in time, and that changes over time. We had a deficit in 2020 that we, advertised to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. And we felt like we wouldn't have any issue with that, covering that. So that created a deficit in 2022. And then what I was talking about last year is essentially a cliff. Because in 2023 and 2024, it just falls off. And then, then you're realizing that we need to make significant cuts or start discussing a potential override. The override is the last thing we want to do, so we're really trying to push this out and deal with this issue, now rather than when we're up against it. So this was last year. At this point in time, you see that the deficit really in 2022. Obviously, if you solve the 2020 problem and you come up with $54,000, that helps solve the 2022 problem, that $62,000 problem. So this year, this is what the 5-year forecast looks like. 22 and 23 look good. It's 24 that looks like we have an issue. And a lot of that's because of our 5-year forecast and the assumptions that we create to do this forecast. Did I do the forecast to this committee at an earlier meeting? Because I presented to the board. I thought I presented it to this committee.
You did.
So those assumptions are 8% in healthcare. Obviously, we're dealing with mid-teens. That's too high. It's way beyond our assumption. We need to cut that down. New growth is assumed to be 150,000. That's one of the low assumptions. And we generally assume that we're going to surpass that. By how much, we have no idea. But that's, an ace in the hole right now that we have. But there are other costs that could blow those assumptions out of the water. So right now, it looks like 2024 is an issue, yet if this year's new growth comes in at, 300,000 versus 150, that 2024 issue is cut in half. So, assuming all other things remain equal, which never happens. So anyway, the 5-year forecast, improved due to actuals exceeding assumptions. New growth forecast at 150 came in at 463. That solved the 2022, and 2023 problem. 5-year forecast shows that 2.5 plus new growth is roughly $700,000 a year, obviously increasing by 2.5. So that's really the number that we have to deal with revenue. Again, state aid is peanuts. The state aid to the town, used to be called lottery aid, is probably $20,000 a year. There's not a lot you can do on a $34, $35 million budget with $20,000. It just doesn't help all that much. But healthcare is our biggest driver. And you know, that's one that we really try to focus on. School department, we try to give them $400,000. That's just for their cost of living salary changes. No additional positions, no changes. If they are thinking about adding positions, they need to discuss cutting positions, because that's the money we give them is for their cost of living adjustments. So that creates some stress, but you know, it is what it is. We've been working well with them. Pension increases, right now, this year it's going up roughly $130,000. Our overall pension costs are now at 1.15, give or take. So this is the contributions that we make to Worcester Regional. The assumption is that our unfunded liability will be paid off in 2035. If we have a few more market days like we had today and yesterday, then that could probably be increased to 2040. That's the way the state deals with, unfunded liabilities. They just push out the funding schedule. It's been pushed out a number of times in the past. It was at one point 2028, and that's coming up in that. So, BVT, it's a big unknown. I think last year or the year before we had an increase of $250,000 because we had 6 additional students attending, 4% cost adjustment in their budget, and you know about our wealth position in that situation. So that's the challenge that we have every year with limited amount of revenue, dealing with all the increased costs that we have to deal with. Tax levy is increasing $881,000. That's 2.5% plus new growth, roughly $700,000. The additional levy increases from the debt exclusion decrease. That's the 98.5 that I talked about earlier. And the additional new growth is, the increase in new growth for recurring costs. So we are using new growth as a recurring cost option. We have no other choice. We try to budget new growth for one-time expenses. We generally fund it for capital. You'll see in the capital plan we have roughly $300,000 in new growth funded for the capital plan. Depending upon how the budget breaks out, we may be able to appropriate more new growth to the capital plan. That's ideal for us, but we've had to start using new growth for recurring costs to continue to support this budget and continue to fund healthcare and the school department at the levels that we would like to. But those choices may not be ours eventually. So the bottom line, we have a structural deficit. We are figuring out ways to deal with that, generally through new growth. If our costs come in below our expectation and new growth exceeds our expectations, then maybe we're good for a couple more fiscal years, maybe 25, 26. The whole idea is last time we had a general override was 2007 as part of the Shaw Farm, I think. And, we raised $400,000 for the schools and $100,000 for the town. A very small override, but that was 13, 14 fiscal years ago. And, we'd like to push that out as far as we could without addressing this. The biggest change here is the meals and hotel tax. I talked about that. 2015, it was 80,000, and 2018 and 19, it was 160 and change. So it's essentially doubled, and a lot of that's the restaurants and the businesses that we have in town. through this. Not a lot here, other than I talked about the pensions, healthcare, I've talked about that too much. So we are looking at increasing the deductible on Fallon Select from 500 to 1,000 to 1,000, 2,000. The 500 is the individual, 1,000 is the family plan, so that's how that works. So that's essentially doubling the deductible on both of those plans. We have an HSA account that I'm a member of and Tim is a member of, which is a high deductible. Right now, it's $1,500 for an individual, $3,000 for a family. We're looking to push that to $2,000 for an individual, $4,000 for a family. The town does match 50% of that at the $1,500 and $3,000. There won't be an increase in the match to the $2,000 and $4,000. So it will remain at a family plan. The $3,000 will remain as a $1,500 when it goes to $4,000. So that's the plan right now. Opt-outs, I think the higher the health insurance goes, and if these last year and this year hold true, that's 15% over 2 years. You'll see more members choose to opt out. For family plans, we offer anybody that opts out, is it $3,000? That opts out of the family plan, it saves the town $10,000 if they choose to opt out. Right now, that number will probably grow to the 30s, somewhere in the 30s, with these premium changes that we're realizing. School capital plan going up significantly in the 439. We share IT with the school department. Dan Durgan is the IT person for the town. We've got servers over at the schools. It's a great relationship. Our systems have never been stronger. We are participating in a cyber security grant process that we awarded from the state, and Dan Durgan is running that for the town at this point. So it's a great system and it works well.
Jim, back to the opt-out real quick.
Yep.
How aware are the employees of that? Is that something that's really prominent to them when you go over the plan changes, you remind them?
Oh, they don't need any reminding of that. To be honest, it's an option, and we try to encourage that for those that have that option of a spouse and has their own health plan. So yeah, no, we don't miss that opportunity.
The thing is, the healthcare costs are rising everywhere, so everyone's increasing their deductible, so they may not have a better plan to opt out to eventually.
And that's the situation. I like, I tell everybody, this is not just the town of Sutton. This is not just a state issue. This is a country issue. So, we're just trying to deal with a $34 million budget, and any way we can do that. So, it's a point well taken.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think at one point we were so rich that nobody opted out.
That's right.
Now we're probably getting closer to market, and
Right.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it's unfortunate, but
Yeah, it's not so much it's the how much we've changed over a short period of time.
Right. You guys did
That's a shock
a lot of
to
work
our
over
employees.
the past few years.
Yeah. And we are looking to increase the transfer station sticker fee by $10 July 1. The board has voted that. I don't think that's a town meeting.
Raising the price of the bags?
Yeah, no. No, it's just the sticker fee. I don't know how much we've looked at the bag fees.
It seems like the bag fees are covering the disposal. The problem is with the recycling. We don't get any recycling of it anymore.
Correct.
So that's really what's driving the sticker fee increase. The more recycling you do, and we promote it, we want you to recycle, but we're not it costs us money to get rid of it.
And there used to be a great secondary market that we would get, $12,000 from Blackstone Recycling Center. We'd bring all our cardboard, plastics, and everything down there. Now it's costing us to transport it to them, and there's no money coming back to us, so.
Well, I said it last year, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna say it
similar
again
issue.
this year. I think you're making a mistake not to raise the price of the bags a quarter, just a little bit. Build up your
Reserves.
and then it's not such a sticker shock when you have to raise it by $1, because, the cost of, taking it over to dispose of it has gone up a lot, so,
No,
that's
that's a point well
one person's
taken.
opinion.
Point well taken. Capital plan, it's a healthy capital plan. A lot of different, I think I've run over these numbers with you in the past. Police, really, that's just 2 cruisers, at $50,000 each. The cruisers have gone up in cost. Right now, the only real option to us is Ford Explorers. When they're all, planned out and as fully operating police cars, it's roughly $50,000 each. So that is 2 cruisers and some handguns. We're replacing the old handguns, the Glocks that we had, but those are, 13, 15 years old. So, we've been through this before, but if you folks want some more detail, it's in your budget book, the capital plan. Free cash is funding a significant amount of that. Again, new growth is the one-time revenue we try to use. That number can increase and may very well increase. If we get more new growth certified at fall town meeting, we will probably appropriate more new growth to the capital plan and take out the free cash. We've been doing that for the last number of years. Retained earning is for the sewer department. That we're gonna do a feasibility study for the transite pipe down in Wilkes section of town. The transite pipe, transite is essentially asbestos. It's not the healthiest situation. It's not a problem as long as it's not breached or damaged, but that pipe is getting up in age, and we're looking at replacing it with, a more reasonable ductile iron or plastic pipe at some point.
Is that throughout Wilkes? Or like
It is, all the sewer in North Sutton, not down in Manchog, is essentially comes up against that pipe. And that's it's a 10-inch pipe that goes underneath the railroad tracks to the Blackstone pump station. And from the Blackstone pump station, it goes along this side of the river to the Millbury pump station, where it's eventually pumped to the Blackstone,
The Upper Blackstone.
Upper Blackstone district. So, as we're looking to have additional sewer here in the center of town, we just don't wanna provide more wear and tear to that pipe that's probably 40-plus years old. So, time to look to replace that. Stabilization fund is nearing $2.5 million. Our OPEB trust fund is nearing $2 million. This last year we put, 300?
Yeah, total of about 400,000.
Okay, so that, a lot of that is because of the Board of Selectmen's funding policy that you folks all have, and it's in your packet as well. It's in your budget book at the beginning. So we are having an issue with the school department. Class sizes are getting reasonable, if not on the lower side. The number of students enrolled in Sutton schools has decreased from when I started at 1,650 now to under 1,400 and 1,300. So it's decreased significantly. I've been told this is a statewide issue, and I don't know why that is, but it is. And they do have an issue with special education costs. And Sutton is not unique. People don't locate in Sutton because of our special ed program. It's special. But there are other school districts in this area, Hopkinton, Grafton, other towns that are just as good as Sutton is. We have to come up with a plan on how we address that. And that's essentially it.
Is there any correlation between as BBT budget grows, our school budget adjusts or no? They can't, right? Because you never know from year to year.
Can you rephrase that?
As, you mean as the headcount shifts to
As the
BBT?
headcount shifts and our costs shift to, we're paying BBT, does the school budget ever
Shrink.
go down because of those
Yeah.
6 other
You know,
kids
that's probably a good question for the superintendent. You know, the majority of the school department, as you know, is salaries. And I think I don't know how it's done because I don't run the school department, but, you know, if you have 5 fewer students,
One year, you don't know what's gonna.
you know, it's hard, it's difficult to eliminate a teacher's position, due through, you know, retirements or, you know, not terminating a position, but, it's just,
Tough to adjust, yeah.
They've done a good job of moving teachers between the early learning center and the elementary school when the class sizes move, and just, you know, adjusting accordingly. I think the problem is when you get to the high school, you've gotta offer, you know, math, you gotta offer all the
Right.
courses, certain electives, you
To
know,
compete
honors
with, to
courses,
stay
AP
competitive
courses.
with
Exactly.
BBT.
And so,
Right.
if you end up with, if you have 24 in a class, or you've got 18 in a class, you still need that same teacher, you still need
Right.
the same supplies.
and you may have AP classes that have, 10 students in there.
Yeah,
But we're providing that option where, you know, we're, you know, staying in the marketplace.
right.
Jim, the highway portion of the capital slide was about $345,000. What's that?
The majority of that is 200,000 for roads. We are, trying to keep up with our roads. With the Chapter 90 monies, of $460,000 on average, it's difficult to keep up with our roads. And our pavement management plan, which is a grade system, and right now we're at like a C level. Whenever we do the minimum, which is the Chapter 90 monies, we always go backwards. Our grade goes down. You know, this year we did Central Turnpike, that was 600,000, and this additional 200,000 goes towards the roads. You know, we feel internally that the pavement management plan and the general override that we were looking at a year or two ago would have been a better solution to this than using the capital stabilization fund to fund it. But the town said no, and so we still have an issue, we need to solve it. So that's one of the items within that. The other is the roof down at the highway barn is, needs to be replaced, essentially. So that's $90,000 in that plan. The rest of it is $25,000 for the windows. If you ever seen those windows, there are vines growing through them. So it's not the most you know, economical situation. You know, those guys have been working in that environment and doing a great job with, you know, their facilities in need of attention.
Okay.
I think that's essentially it for the highway department.
I just didn't know if it was a piece of equipment or.
No, you know, it's a
Something like
bunch of little stuff. We also put $30,000 in for tree removal. You know, we did the MVP grant process, and one of the items that came up were, you know, dead and dying trees on the roadsides, and we've had a catastrophe a couple years ago on Central Turnpike where a tree fell on a car and killed someone. So, it's something that we need to address. We budget $35,000 a year in tree removal, and this is just an extra amount of money to hire a contractor to go out and clear as many trees as they can.
Jim, doesn't a cell tower generate some revenue that we
It does.
fund? And did I hear, did another carrier go live, or?
Yes, AT&T. So Verizon is up there, was live a couple years ago. AT&T just went live. We've been collecting money from AT&T, I think, since May. And that's part of the OPEB contribution. The Board of Selectmen policy on OPEB has all the revenue from that cell tower going towards OPEB. So right now, that's, $40,000 plus, AT&T plus Verizon. So that's,
So since May, we've already been getting what they're.
yeah, but
it's-
yeah, that
it's
was
not
part of
gonna-
the contract that we created early on, that, we receive the money as soon as the application is done. It doesn't matter when it goes live, it just went live recently. But we started receiving revenue back in May.
Where are we on the park? We were gonna collect some money from the neighbors and,
Unity Park?
yeah, I forgot the name of it.
It's Unity Park down
Oh,
in
thank you.
Wilkes.
I apologize. Unity Park. I thought you were asking me the name.
No, it's, it's great. We've collected over $60,000, which will obviously go towards funding this project, and, whatever we collect on the, through donations, we're able to, take back what the town put up initially to fund this project. It was a $100,000 matching grant, but to qualify, we needed to put all the money up front, which was last, I think it was May town meeting?
Right.
That we did that. That we took the vote to put 200 and, I don't know what the number was,
230,000.
up front. And then the private group went out and did some individual fundraising. Some banks and some other entities have contributed. So right now, they're doing a mailing out to the residents for additional fundraiser to try to generate additional revenues. This park group that's doing the fundraising would like to expand their scope to not just Unity Park, but also look at different parks around town, Veterans Field down in Manchog, maybe a little bit at Marion's Camp, just wherever revenue is needed, they want to be the fundraiser for it.
So in theory, it could end up costing the town nothing if they continue on.
It could.
Okay.
Yeah, if that match to the state grant, that $100,000 is raised through private fundraising, then that free cash that funded it initially would come back to the town.
Okay. Well, I'm just still thinking of your shortfall here, so I'm trying to help you.
It's free cash. If you can come up with recurring revenue, I'd appreciate that.
Are any of the cell providers looking to come in, or just the two?
We did have, we've obviously been open to that idea, and I think the zoning board is as well. There was one down at Blackstone National Golf Course. They went through the permitting process. They got approval to put in a cell tower at 195 feet, and nothing's come of it. So I don't know what's going on with that. I haven't talked to the owner there. I can't
I
remember.
don't mean a new tower, I mean new companies.
I think a lot of the providers use Verizon and AT&T as their.
Yeah, the only other one is Sprint and T-Mobile, which now is one company, as I understand it. So, or they're in the process of merging, or something's going on with that. So, I was told by John Arthur, who runs the cell tower town farm, that as soon as that deal is worked out, expect another applicant from T-Mobile/Sprint, and that'd be, I think, the last of the carriers, to my understanding.
Was the approval of Blackstone from a company or from a tower builder? Was it from a phone company or a tower builder?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
The application was from the owner of Blackstone. But I don't know if it was on behalf of American Tower or a specific tower company. So I can get you that information if you're interested.
But he wanted to have a tower to get
He did.
rental income.
He did. And solely for the purpose of generating the income.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether Town Farm Road dealt with his issues. You know, it does provide some reception around the schools.
Mhm.
Verizon is decent reception outside, I know, that's all I know. But you know, definitely AT&T going live now should provide additional reception. So I know there's a lot of information there, and you know, some of the members are relatively new. If you have any additional questions, just email me or you know, stop by and ask. You know, the budget message should provide additional information if you really want to dig deep into it. You know, all the information's in there.
So are you all set on the police station? I mean, I understand it's up and running, but I
Yeah.
mean, communications are working okay? We're
Yeah.
not looking at anything that didn't happen that we need to add?
We
to?
are, yeah, no, it's interesting you ask. We are in the process of trying to close it out. And that's a number of last-minute change orders and finalizing the agreement. You know, paying everybody what they're owed, retainage, dealing with some issues that were never finally closed out. So we, you know, received an email recently from our OPM discussing the final closeout option. I think it got it today or yesterday, and did you email Neil back?
Yep.
So we're in the process of closing that out finally, but the communications are terrific, according to the chief. So that was our biggest concern. And it's vastly improved. Thank you to everybody in the town that supported the significant investment that we have made. But I have heard no complaints about the communications.
Do we come in under budget?
Yet to be seen. We won't be going back to town meeting, I can tell you that. I think the final closeout, we came close. You know, we pared it back and asked for what we thought we needed. We didn't pad it at all, so we came in close, but I think we'll come out to the positive,
Good.
so.
And do we have enough experience now from the utilities and the increase in insurance that's all reflected in your new budget? By carrying this new building, operating expenses, added
Yeah,
insurance. to
no,
town
we'll still
liability.
need, you know, we're in the process of, you know, initially I funded, you know, expenses for the new police department in one line item. You know, eventually we're gonna work that into individual line items, excuse me, where they belong. You know, electricity is a big one, that we don't know what the electricity cost is, but we've got 6 months of experience in the department. We're able to take that out of that lump sum appropriation and line item it appropriately. So we are working through that. I wouldn't say all the costs will be real this year, but within the next year or so. Next year will probably be final. You know, it's a process of understanding.
And I saw in your note, I thought we had solar on that.
No,
We
that
don't
was
have
one
that?
of the ad alternatives that we turned down, to keep the project within the cost of, you know, a town meeting vote. So we will, you know, we are looking at putting solar on the carport, which would help us with our electric bills down at the police station. So we've got a couple of people looking at that, and maybe at next year's capital plan, we'll have that in there as well.
All right, well, thank you very much. Anybody else have any other questions? So the only thing is, well, we still have Jim here, so I show that our next meeting is March 17th at 6:30, and you have the list, and then we'll go to the 25th, and then April 1st. There's a chance that sewer might move to the April 1 meeting, but that's to be determined,
Yes, that's correct.
okay? So if that's it, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you, and we look forward to working with you here, you know, and you too. So I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I have to use this.